sorry, I forgot.
Recording started.
Okay, it's 6:30. We'll call the meeting to order. Excuse me, we've called the meeting to order.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I'll open the select board meeting as well. No, no,
Yeah, we
you
do.
have to formally open it.
Yeah,
Right.
you do.
Yeah.
And we'll have to vote to adjourn separately.
Okay,
So do we want to go,
right to,
can we go straight to the
yeah,
presentation and then we'll do minutes after?
yeah. Sounds good.
All right, with that, I guess I'll jump in real quick, but I've invited Rick Campbell here. If you guys remember or attended the select board meeting, Rick Campbell's from PayPoint HR, the consultants that did our study. And he's put together a little PowerPoint that he can share. It's going to review a little bit of kind of the process and what they went through and then talk about the findings of the study. So, Rick, it's all yours.
All right. And, give me a second and I will on the share. And you can see my screen okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Hold on. There it is.
Yes, there we go.
There it is. Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me here tonight. And without further ado, I mean, Ed is, usually to the point, so I'll follow along and do the same. For the most part, the procedure that we go through in doing compensation studies and is pretty similar, across the country. Work with certainly many clients in New Hampshire, but the process is pretty common. We effectively use 3 yardsticks to figure out what fair pay is. And this kind of information that I'm sharing with you in the entirety of it is what I share to all parties, part of our process that I think helps make it work well is transparency to not only employees, to elected officials, to administration, so that everybody's on the same page, because this is honestly just fact-driven approach. There's no personalities, there's no bias. It's just, again, facts. So having said that, our approach, fairly straightforward. We use 3 yardsticks to figure out what fair pay is. The first yardstick that we use is we look at the external market, what other people are paying for the same work. The second yardstick that we use is org structure to make sure that the crew leaders are above, the rank and file and, below the, superintendents and the like, that their structure is maintained. And then the third one is knowledge, skills, and abilities. Our approach for that portion of it is to actually ask the people doing the work, what is the knowledge, skills, and abilities that, in their experience is required to do the job well. We emphasize to the employees that it isn't a performance review. It is just about the job. As far as PayPoint being an unbiased third party, we just assume everybody's excellent because there's no reason for us to assume, honestly, anything different. We also communicate to employees that, there would be a manager review of what they put down. So as a checks and balance to make sure, you could think of it in a negative sense to make sure that they're not overstating what they do. But in my experience, employees tend to be very modest and don't include all the things that they do. Okay. And case in point, we did that portion of the study while it was very nice and warm outside and leaves were all, green. Well, they're falling and they're wonderful colors that, everywhere. And soon enough, there'll be snow. Those kinds of things, this time of year, people sometimes forget to put down on, the knowledge, skills, and abilities or the job duties that are required. So having that oversight helps us make sure that employees are effectively getting credit for all the things that they do. Now, at the end of the day, what we do is statistically combine, those 3 different yardsticks together. And basically this slide covers just what I was talking about in a lot of words, or on black and white, I should say. Now, the reason why we go through this approach and not just exclusively rely on what other people are paying is because there can be different titles that you value more so than other places. Or another good case in point, if you have a brand new title with a, a new department that's just being, started, and I know you have one, is it completely fair to compare it with another organization that's been in existence and has a, massive structure? And the answer is no. So we have to take into consideration all the different aspects of what makes Enfield unique. So that's why we use the 3 yardsticks to look at it in multiple different ways to come up with, at the end of the day, what is not only fair for employees in terms of representation, but also, and this was communicated to them as well because they are taxpayers, that we are being fair and upfront to taxpayers as part of this process. Now, in terms of comparators, this kind of information we went in and discussed it with the project team at the very beginning. And once we came up with a list of comparators, we froze it in place. We didn't go back later on and say we didn't like this person's response or do any kind of cherry picking. We started at the beginning and said, let's look at some socioeconomic factors of Enfield and compare it to all the communities basically in the region, if you will. The ones that you see on the screen are the ones that chose to respond, so very good response rate. So that's a very good thing. But in the process, in a big picture, we look at things like cost of living, housing price, housing income, and the like, to make sure that we're drawing an apples to apples comparison. Now, there was one of these places that did respond on this list that is a natural comparator to you, but the economics are different, and that being Hanover. They're a little bit, I don't want to say night and day difference, but they are a reasonable competitor for labor. So that's why they were included. Now, does one response, dramatically alter results? No. When you have one versus the other 29, the answer is no. But it is, again, a reasonable organization to include. Now, as I mentioned, one of the things that our approach is that 3 yardstick. And one is to ask employees to fill out a job questionnaire, relatively straightforward, and ask them about the details of their job. Not only the job duties, but the impact their job has, the degree of independence that they have as part of their job, any kind of supervision or financial responsibilities. And then based on that, we're able to compare all job titles across the organization. So you can compare somebody in DPW to, PD. It's a reasonable comparison because same questionnaire, same kind of factors, and it allows you to, in an unbiased fashion, look to see the responsibilities of every job at the town. Now, what we do at the end, and part of what in part makes PayPoint unique, is that we, at the end of the day, correlate all this data together. That's why my wife chooses to employ me in this job, to make sure things are, that all the different yardsticks, to see if they do line up, that they are saying the same things. In this case, very high degree of correlation between knowledge, skills, and ability, which is there on the x-axis or horizontal axis, and what the market is paying for positions. That's important, again, to have the multiple yardsticks telling you the same thing. Gives you a higher degree of confidence in the results, certainly. But it also, looking forward down the road a bit, it gives you a way of maintaining all of what has been produced as part of this study. So, for example, when a job title takes on additional responsibilities, the question is well, what is fair pay for the position? Well, you have the answer. If they take on more responsibilities, the financial responsibilities increase. Well, already, in this case, knowledge, skills, and ability, by looking on the horizontal axis, how that correlates to pay. So it's a very useful tool for not only existing titles that change substantially in the future, but also brand new titles, as the town grows. So next slide. So that gets us down to the external market results. what you see here on the table is an average. And I want to make sure that's clear. An average can be thought of in, if you look at a set of numbers in two different ways, essentially. You could have, if the average says, 0%, for example, that could mean you have all the responses close to zero, right? If they're all closer to zero, then they'll effectively be zero. But also averages say that if you had several that are 10% low and 10% high, that will average out to be zero as well. So with that in mind, this is kind of a big picture snapshot. We average the results for the different titles, not only for the town overall, but each department as well. So give you a snapshot. Now, what do we mean by the market? Well, the market by strategically, what we've defined as the 50th percentile or the middle. So if you had 10 organizations, that means 5 pay more than Enfield and 5 pay less. That's all that 50th percentile means. The reason why we do that is because what you'll see in the full report for each and every job title, you see with the 20th percentile to the 80th and everywhere in between. So you have a complete picture of the market. That allows you to make strategic decisions, on how, this body wants to, compensate employees. We start off with being at the middle of the market, but you also have the pretty straightforward ability to be at a different percentage. And I put that out there because 50th percentile is commonly where most of our clients want to be at, but some of them, as during the process of time, decide, well, we want to get ahead of inflation. We know the physical impact that people experience and want to do at a higher level. So be it. There's nothing wrong with that. Other times when we do studies like this and the dollars come about, and that'll be in a slide or two, it may be, the financial impact may be too much to handle in either 1 year or, at all. It is finite dollars. This was communicated to employees at the beginning, so there is no surprises, on that aspect. But that gives you, again, an opportunity to make adjustments based on, the priorities that you set forward. Now, next step really is to look at each job title. Every title was looked at independent of all the other ones. So it is theoretically possible, and I'm not saying this was the result, but it is just possible that you could have a patrol officer, for example, and a sergeant, with the patrol officer being substantially below market and a sergeant to be substantially, above. That is theoretically possible because every title is considered or treated separately. No department or series of job titles were valued or considered any more or less important, at the town. These are just basically results of data and presented in that fashion, principally so that you can believe that it is just facts. Now you will see in terms of job titles that are substantially below market. And again, to reemphasize what the market is the middle in this definition. You have a range of titles from, top to bottom there, from the assistant town manager to administrative assistant. And sometimes it happens that way. Sometimes, it can be radically different. Again, every title is treated separately. And no real groups of job titles are, again, valued more highly than any other. Now, in terms of recommendations, one of our recommendations, and this is principally based on what we saw in the market, what other communities are doing, is to put everybody on a step system plan with the 12 steps as part of the process. 5% between the steps to make sure there's a sufficient incentive for employees to seek advancement. And for the spread between minimum and maximum, our recommendation was 40%. And that is based on, again, the results of the study. Communities that responded to the survey on average the width between minimum and maximum is 39.3%. So that's where it was created, to be similar to other organizations. And we placed all job titles basically on the scale. Now, when the rubber meets the road, what is the financial implications of it all? So to move those positions that were identified as substantially below market, 9 of them in total, the cost, and this does not include benefits, is approximately $81,623. For the positions that are just below market, and that's 5 to 10% below, it only impacts 4 positions, and you can see the cost there is about $27,000. And then to move everybody onto a step plan, there is some minor adjustments that are required from Ed's position on down, and the cost for that would be $29,106. So overall, pretty light in my experience, particularly when doing it more or less for the first time. Sometimes in doing these and creating a new system, the physical impact, in particular relative to the inflation that we've just experienced and the substantial adjustment to wages, these numbers, again, I do this for a living, I can speak confidently, are usually much higher. What that says to me, though, is that this body has been very good at making sure people are been kept up with the market, and that's a good statement. So to continue along that path, the cost to make minor adjustments to a few positions speaks well. Now again, this is all based on strategically being at the exact middle of the market. The cost would be certainly higher if you chose to be at a higher percentage of the market, or a little bit less if you wanted to be at a lower percentage. Whatever, again, you strategically choose to do. And with that concludes the PowerPoint, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I have one. On the prior slide, before the conclusion slide, I think I had 3 pieces to it. I don't think I understand what the third one meant.
All right, let me see. So this one, right now, is the third bulleted item.
4, no changes
4.
recommended.
Right. So there's, again, this was communicated to all employees. There's a few job titles that are below market. There are some job titles that are paid right in alignment where they should be. You are at the middle of the market currently. And then there are job titles that are currently paid better at Enfield than at other places. So typically on that last bulleted item, for the positions that are above market, normally our recommendation is to allow time to bring them into alignment. This also includes that statement there in case you had to bring somebody up to the minimum of a grade. That's why that particular terminology is in there. But conceptually, that is kind of our recommendation for the titles that are at mark or above market, to allow for time to bring them closer to where everybody else is.
So new grade minimum means like the next grade up, you slowly.
Right. So there could be a case in point, and this is the easiest one. So that, say the minimum of a grade is $15 an hour, and for whatever, and currently you're paying 12. Even if to make it, you'd at least move them all the way up to that minimum of the new grade, and that's all that means. But that was not, you didn't have to make any of those kinds of adjustments in this case, but just a generic statement.
I can explain the grade and step system as we move forward.
Okay, because what I'm trying to figure out is if, let's say, we're so fortunate to decide that we're gonna bring everybody where they need to be, the ones that are above, paid above it, do they not get something, which would be kind of an emotional?
What I would
Disaster.
probably recommend, and I'll be presenting to you guys what I think we should do at a
Okay.
future meeting, but, what I would probably do someone like that is they would get the cost of living that year, but not
Yeah.
some sort of step or something.
Okay,
And that's kind of what we're moving towards, is to have the cost of living change the scale. And then we'll have some step movement and different ways to reward it.
Right, and what you're describing is a very good way of doing it, Ed, is to move the scale by a cost of living every year. That theoretically keeps you in alignment with everybody else, you know, all the other communities that you're competing with labor. And then to move people within the grades relative to whether performance or, you know, or other measure. But moving the scale helps the organization overall keep in alignment to be competitive in the market.
And I had a question on the external competitiveness takeaway. The report says overall job titles at Enfield are compensated 2.1% below market.
Correct.
So I want to understand, in aggregate,
Mhm.
does that mean that Enfield, if you will, is 2.1% below market as it applies to the entire payroll?
No, it's not relative to the payroll. So what we've done for all the job titles is to look at independently each one of them to say, if you had one that's 10% and another one below and another one 10% above and all the different percentages like that, we added them up and divided it by, you know, the number of job titles. That's all that's really kind of saying. On a budgetary perspective, you have to kind of shift gears, and then you're talking more along the lines of you have to figure out what individuals are being paid relative to other individuals and other municipalities. So to your point, this is an aggregate kind of number. And it is intended to highlight, honestly, if there is one area that seems to be lagging or leading more so than others. There is two departments overall. You could say whether it's the, you know, the library and recreation. Now, how many job titles in there? You know, that could be two job titles. So that can kind of skew things, if you will, versus, you know, public works where there's a lot more job titles. It is in part to take this with a grain of salt because it is an aggregate number. The best way to look at this, in my opinion, is to look at the full report and see every single job title because they're treated all independently. So you can see level 1, 2, and 3, whether they're in PD or public works or whatever, you know how far off or out of alignment individual job titles are. That is the most accurate way because it's not a average in any sense where these values certainly are. That comes about, you know, in the ones that are out of alignment, where our recommendations are highlighting is these particular job titles that are between more than that are, you know, below market effectively.
So put another way, your recommendations 1, 2, and 3 total $137,497. Does that place Enfield at the market?
That places each and every job title independently at the market. So collectively, yes. But it's important to recognize it's each individual job title. We'll move to the middle of the market. Because like I said, with an average or an aggregate, you could be as an organization overall in the market with a bunch of titles that are 10% below and a bunch of titles 10% above and still be in aggregate, you know, right in alignment. We don't do that. We make sure that all the titles are right in alignment, and that's how these recommendations are created.
And then with that, you would have to add this year's cost of living, because everybody else is getting that, so it'd be on top of that.
Yeah.
Question, does town population in here get weighted at all?
There is no weighting. Part of what we do is we make sure that on a statistical basis, that the organizations, whether it's population, median household income, housing price, and the like, are within 3 standard deviations of one another. So that typically eliminates places that are much, much wealthier. It also eliminates places that are much, much poorer relative to Enfield. What we want to do is make sure we have a sample that is roughly the same. That's the easiest way of making, judgments. Since we had 30 respondents, that's going to cover the gamut pretty well. You're going to have places, to your point, that are larger, a little bit larger, and you're going to have places that are also smaller, places that are a little bit wealthier, some places that are a little bit less, and the whole 9 yards. But they are all, again, in this case, in aggregate, are similar to Enfield.
Except him.
There-
That we added.
There's a notation that you added manually, Canaan as a comparator. Is and I doubt they responded to anything because don't have them listed in the respondees. Does that mean that, they're reflected somewhere else in the report in terms of results?
What community was that again?
No,
Canaan.
we submitted to Canaan and a few other towns, and they did not participate.
Right, but there's a line in there that says it was added.
No,
Right,
we
so
asked,
in the report, like what Ed was saying is, when we presented it to the list of comparators that we'd come up with, PayPoint independently, there were additional places that were weighed in that was believed to be a natural competitor for labor. And good and fine. Again, this is like in the report, it's black and white. It's shown there. Surveys were sent out to them. The ones, not only the ones that we recommended, but also the project team recommended. It's all black and white in there. The ones that responded are the ones here certainly on the screen, and also indicated in the report.
No, I know they didn't respond, that's why they're not.
no surprise.
Yeah.
We have a lot going on.
They were added by us after the fact,
Well, we helped Adam, we discussed that.
Ask a question, I know I'm the audience. The numbers that you reflected in the report, are they indicative of projected 2024 COLA as well, or no?
No.
Just wanted to make.
Yeah.
No, these are on
Make sure it's clear.
2023 rates.
Good question. Gotta know.
Already working on that.
I just-
Any more questions? Good. Thank you, Rick.
All right, thank you. And if you do have any questions that you want to pass them along to Ed, I'm happy to answer anything and everything. This entire process, the reason why it works is transparency, and just these are just facts. And it's very easy to communicate, to help educate, any party, and we're happy to do so.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Thanks.
So I like their report. I've worked with them once before because of the standard deviation metric, that they're not taking any bias into account. They take a statistical average of the towns and say, whether you believe they are or not, they're a comparator. And so that's kind of what I like about them. And then, like I said, they really do a lot of work with the team to, what do you do for a job? And then that job sheet gets passed to their supervisor, who reviews it and says, like he said, I think most of them were additions of they do this, this, and this as well. And but there were a couple of subtractions and things that got put on there. Yeah, you've done that once. That's not part of your job duty. So, I mean, it's a pretty good overall picture, I think, of where we stand with other people. I would agree with him. I've been through a few of these and 2.1% is pretty darn close to the mark.
Yeah.
You know, I think the work that the budget committee's done the last couple years with the 5% and the 8% raises pushed us a lot closer. We knew what we were doing when that happened, and it shows that it was right on mark. I was hoping we didn't do that and go the other way, where we were 2.1% over or something. We didn't. We're close on most positions. There's a few positions that are a little far out of whack. There's a couple of them in there, like he said, that we kind of have to weigh where we're at in that position right now. You know, does that position earn that amount of money right now, or are we moving in that direction to get them there? And there's a lot of things to take into account as we make those recommendations moving forward. One thing we've talked about, and I guess I'd like to get your guys' opinion, but they have the grade and step scale that they created for us. They created it on the 12 step with a 5% between each step, which I guess you would not be able to get a step every year, because 5% plus COLA would be a pretty big raise every year. We were talking about maybe doubling that out and taking it to 2.5%. So the employees felt like they were moving more often, whether it was an annual move or maybe even not quite. And then it also would give us the freedom and ability to go, you know, this position's going crazy in the market. We're gonna move you 2 steps. And so I think it gives us a little more flexibility if we push that scale out a little farther. Plus, it's a 24 steps. So if you're in a position like the assessing assistant that has been in the position probably close to 24 years, she doesn't hit max at 12 years and not have anywhere else to go. So those are the kind of the things we've been talking through and thinking about this week. And I wanted to see what the budget committee wants or would expect.
Are you assuming that there's a step increase every year?
I think we'd be looking at that, but I think, you know, it's gonna be good for employee morale if there's some sort of movement often. Whether it's annually or every couple years or however we set that up.
If you want to start that way,
Mhm.
and then you slow down.
Yeah.
Can somebody explain the step?
So it's in your compensation report. They put everybody into grades. So there's EO1 through E25, which is ranked, I think 25, is it 25 is the highest?
Yes.
Yeah, so my position would be 25. And an entry level lifeguard or something would be an EO1, and then everybody's scored kind of in between those on their grade of what their position makes. And then the steps would be some sort of regular increase. I won't say annual, but most grade and steps have an annual move.
This increase comes on top of the traditional raise.
COLA.
Yeah. So if you're starting at a base of 2.5.
You know, we've had the
Give a
debate
two
in
COLA.
here every
You're
year.
at 4.5%.
I'm just wondering.
Since I've been here, we've had the debate every year of what do we give as a raise, and it's COLA
Yeah.
plus this, plus that, and this gives you the plus, and we figure out what COLA is gonna be, and we leave a little bit more up to that with supervisors, and then
Should the step raises also be accompanied by a question of effectiveness of that employee?
I think so. Yeah,
Steps are
I think you
merit-based.
kind of have, I don't wanna call it a pay for performance system, because
No.
they usually don't work, but
I'm just calling it effectiveness of the person within the structure.
there's ways that we can set this up that, yeah, if your eval doesn't merit a move, that's the part that gets held back unless you're a really bad employee, and then both get held back, but that doesn't happen very often.
So the step replaces the merit?
It would be merit. We don't have
Yeah,
merit.
we don't have it.
The step is the merit.
For lack of a better term.
I'm gonna ask the question that's always really hard in these, and we talked about a lot in the school district in the past. Is there a maximum that a position is worth? Are there some positions that just aren't worth $50 an hour?
Or
If-
are
over the
there,
period?
Personally, I don't like maximums, just because you just smash that employee when they hit the maximum, that, you know, the number one, well, not number one reason people leave employment is because of their supervisor, but in that number 2 to 3 range is because there's a lack of a career ladder and nowhere to go. When you hit that, even subconsciously, the word maximum just tells you you're not gonna get anything else. You're at the end of your career.
To me, the position number though, right, your EO1 and EO2, like if you're in EO1 and you decide you're gonna spend your entire life in EO1, that shouldn't go to the state where you could develop yourself career-wise, like you get plenty of opportunities. Shouldn't you be able to develop into an EO2 or EO3?
Yeah,
And so,
absolutely.
to me, that's not a maximum. You've limited yourself by refusing to.
Some,
have that.
but we don't necessarily work that way, and the assessing clerk is the perfect example. There is no promotion from there unless you wanna completely change departments. So she can't move up to assessor or something and.
No, I understand that on those ones. I'm just thinking at because you have every organization, there's,
Well, that's part of the reason I wanted to
Yeah.
take that 40% spread that he said is the average.
Yeah.
And spread it over 24 years. If you're in one position for 24 years, that's pretty much a career.
Yeah.
You're not gonna be there much
you got
over,
your retirement at 20, right?
not necessarily, but I mean, it's based on age and time in service. So if you started young, you could have a 30-year career before you're eligible to retire, but it's still most of your career. And, you know, when you have a 24-year employee, at that point, you start deciding, you know, is it worth another 0.5%? And the scale's gonna be moving, and where they at? I mean, there's gonna be some managerial decisions at that point, but.
I guess if I just look at, like, use the widget example we use in business, right? You're making widgets and you decide that you're just gonna hammer widgets the rest of your life, right? 'Cause that's what you wanna do. At what point is, I feel like there's a maximum on widgets.
Well, there's a scale.
Right, you hit the top, but you hit the top of it, so the top of the scale be, a lot of organizations, the scale has a bit of almost a ladder within the scale, right? So you never start somebody in an E25 over in step 1. Because they wouldn't be qualified to be hired, I guess. It's like a,
See, this one's not set that way. The
It's by
minimum
job
requirements to be hired at E25 is the starting scale of E25.
maybe I've been in public too long, but I've never seen 24 scale.
Me
Yeah.
either. We always
Yeah.
lived with 10,
Yeah.
but we got the first 3 years we were employed, we'd get a step every year.
Right.
And then it was 5 years. If there's a COLA in between, we get that, but
Right.
at 5 years, we got a step, and then, what was it, 10? And then, but you could go up to step 2.
We could look at something like that. I do like, and we've talked about this too, I like escalating a little faster those first 5 years, because when you hire someone and they're learning,
Good.
they're getting more and more valuable.
Yeah, I can agree with that. It's when you,
I could do the 5.
a job is worth so much.
Yeah.
And
And-
the idea of you're not learning anything new after 15 years. Really, except for John, because he was there at the time, like,
Yeah, but
yeah, you know?
I think
Yeah,
you're
the
also. getting-
dinosaurs and I.
Well, yeah, but I guess, a job is worth so much.
Well, I can.
And what
I think you're-
happens
I
is,
think what you're not catching, what we were talking about though, is in his 12-step plan, the maximum might have been 40. What we're doing is stretching that out. It's not you go above that.
well, no, but I'm
just-
closer to
Moves to there.
12 steps at 2.5 than I am 24 steps at 2.5.
But you're not gonna get to the minimum maximum of what the market is saying this job should be paid.
Well, I mean, I brought up the population question for one reason. The median of what he's got is 8,600 as a population, and there's nobody smaller than us. And, you know, in a lot of positions, this population does make a difference.
Which is why we have one of many of our positions, because we are
Right,
5,000-ish, depending on the day.
right.
It's hard when you only have one person too, and you want them to stay. That's why I use the example of widgets, right? Like if the widget takes no new technology and no new learning, that's where I get nervous.
Well, then they stay in an EO1 and at the end of their career, they will be paid at whatever the rate is.
The maximum rate for EO1.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
I
won't
mean,
get.
this is a,
Well, no, they're going to be above an EO4 and an EO5 who's been here for 5 years.
Who has some
Who's doing-
training and
and
an
has training
expectation.
and is-
That's why.
Maybe.
Has moved himself up to an AO4.
Well, and one thing with that we've talked about too, is if you do something like that and extend the scale out, then you do away with the longevity that we have, because you're earning it as part of your step.
Okay,
Oh, yeah, okay.
well, I think we need to be careful that the step doesn't become a performance indicator. It's a step.
Well, or it doesn't become an automatic.
Yeah. I
I'm
mean,
looking
you
at
have
it
to
from
have
the other
some
side. It doesn't
performance.
become.
Well, yeah, no, it should be automatic.
Well,
But,
no, because what happens is then there is no performance. There is no back.
oh, that's not true.
Well, no,
I mean,
because
the reality
if the step is there and you're talking about a step plus a COLA,
COLA should be
Super-
something that you get
supervisors-
automatically, just to
Su-
stay even with the cost of
Right.
living.
I,
And then the
right,
step is not.
I agree, that should be automatic,
right.
but I think he has a point here.
My real point is supervisors, if the step is 2.5, the supervisors are gonna go, well, I'm not gonna, give them a 1.5 because they'll leave. Why didn't I get my 2.5?
Well, that's part of what we need to talk about too, because his
Yeah.
step and grade step system, there is no in between the steps. You move from one to
Right.
To
the
the
next.
other.
So you
Yeah.
get that percentage.
And I
There's
guess
No
you-
matter what,
between steps.
you either merit the step and you're staying as a member of our team,
right.
you know you have a problem. I guess if you don't merit a COLA raise, frankly, we should be probably considering the
You
hard
will
walk
be
out
on
the
a
door.
needs.
Right.
You're on a needs improvement plan.
Okay, yes, I
Yeah.
guess I'm on board with that methodology.
Same here.
Yeah,
I think,
So we can look at a couple of them. I'll look at a couple different things and we'll come back and talk, but. I like extending the scale out just because there is no final end. You hit the top, you're not moving anymore. It's, to me, that's demoralizing.
So,
But if we can increment.
and that's when people have a powerful motivation to look elsewhere,
Yeah,
right.
where they can move.
As soon as you
Right.
hit max, it's like, well, I
Yeah.
might as well look. Even if you're getting paid the maximum that the market will do, there's a subconscious,
Yeah.
they don't value me anymore.
Absolutely.
subconsciously and not subconsciously. I did like the county's idea of, because it's a COLA, it shouldn't be based on what you're making today. Their COLA is an amount. It's 50 cents an hour, and everybody gets 50 cents an hour as a COLA because inflation hits everybody the same.
Yeah.
Because the biggest pieces are gas, oil, groceries for people, no matter if you're at the top of a scale or at the bottom of a scale.
that's not true, because if they have a mortgage and they end up with a variable rate, they can get hit pretty hard.
Well, yeah. I
Well,
mean, it
And that's
depends,
more
but
dollars.
But everybody gets it.
I get what you're talking
Everybody
about,
gets it.
as
But
long
some
as you
people
don't.
with the greater income might go for a larger house.
Hmm.
And then they're in their mortgage.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't
That's-
get
but
into
this
that.
mortgage is
I
outside.
agree with you. The one thing you have to watch there that's going to happen if you do that many years in a row is you're gonna start to get compression.
Yeah.
Right,
And you're gonna start to lose the top to the rest of the market because they're not doing that.
right.
I get
And
why.
then you'll have
Yeah.
big spikes of having to raise your higher admin bigger amounts.
Well,
that
at least the
hurts.
step system
But
lets
I don't
employees
disagree.
know what to expect as
Yeah.
opposed to whether or not the boss likes them or not.
But it should also not be guaranteed,
No, it's not.
That's fine,
because
but,
otherwise,
but they
Right.
need to know
There's
what it
no-
is.
It
there's
said,
no incentive.
It's, you merit it, you
or you don't.
don't. Or you're on a needs improvement plan and halfway out the door.
Well, yeah, you either merit or you don't.
Right, but on the needs improvement, you're not getting your COLA either, probably.
No, we can look at some other things. The thing I haven't put any thought into this that I've talked with some of my department heads about was creating more of a career ladder. So we might have
Right.
3 steps through the E's right now in the police department. Maybe we create some positions that we're not necessarily filling, but it gives the opportunity for someone to do some training and get some education and advancement to go into that. The one example that I use that's pretty easy for people to understand is we have Lieutenant Fry and we do not have a captain's position.
Yeah.
So we can have a lieutenant and a captain and say we're only filling one of those 2. Based on education, experience, those things, they can dictate
Right.
where they're at on that scale. And it
Objective
gives them
scale.
control, and we talked about that in DPW too, having
Right.
a light equipment operator and a light equipment operator 2 and a light equipment operator 3. And they learn different skills, they're in charge of training, different things like that.
And there'll be job descriptions for all of these different things, right?
Yeah, or it'll be a job description with education, years in service, blah, 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 that you have to meet to move to that next level.
Well, but the next level should encompass it.
It will.
I
It's-
like work.
Right.
Yeah, it just might not be a fully separate job description. It'll be in one stating you do these requirements.
There's a
and these
different
duties.
scale with education and without education. Right.
Yeah, and duties.
And duties,
Yeah.
right.
What I think you need to do is come back to the budget committee with the recommendation how to begin to implement
Yeah.
this plan as we are speaking of it. So that they then have, if you will, a baseline budget number onto which they then can consider a COLA.
Yeah, and I would recommend that I'm going to recommend as part of this, that we base our COLA off the Bureau of Labor Statistic Boston metric based in July of every year. July, year to year, if you've looked at that, it changes in the months, so you could pick a month that it changes. If we do July, by the time we're coming to you in October and we've done the budget in August, September, those numbers are released. We know what they are. We can come into the budget with this is what it is. And on a year to year basis, it'll be the same as if you picked any other month. It changes equally. This year, if we look at the Boston metric, it's 2.8 in July. It's 2.6 if you use September's. It's 3 point something if you use May. So I think picking a month is really important. So we use the same month every year. And then we just use that metric for cost of living. We don't have to really discuss cost of living. We can say what it is. And then we look at the step portion of that and then figure out a way, whether it's a rolling or just every few years, we do an update to the compensation study to make sure we're in the ballpark. And I think we can use something a lot less expensive than we did this time just to see if we're in the ballpark.
Oh, I think this is a 10-year baseline. I don't think you'd need to do much with this report for 10 years.
Yeah, but I think you want to keep the numbers updated.
You want to update the numbers, but essentially the program that, as he's outlined
Oh,
it,
yeah.
is something that will allow you to provide, to use as a management tool for 10 years.
So, another question, did the market comparison include benefits in any way?
No,
No.
Is it just offhand, I mean, just gut reaction, do you think there's a big variation between towns and the kinds of benefits offered?
There are some variations. It's, I don't want to say we're not going to do it because I think this is something that we as a staff can work on in the next year or so to look at and compare, but it is nearly impossible to do an apples to apples comparison because there's so many different variations of healthcare and those types of things. So,
Co-insurance.
I mean,
Deductible.
so I've heard things, in meetings where people go, well, they're 25, 75%. And then you go talk to that town administrator and you go, yeah, but they cover the entire deductible. And it's, I mean, there's just so many little things that people negotiate and put into these plans that you got to spend an hour or two with each community to figure out what apples to apples.
Dartmouth, for example, will look at the health plan as a separate line item. And will say on a particular year, that they want to bump it a little more in terms of benefit to the employee than a previous year. So that if it's particularly expensive in a particular year, they will put in some extra money towards the employee, but it will only apply to that year only.
And the one thing I may be able to get from him, because I think we asked these questions, and I'll dig a little bit, but a lot of times they take benefits and they'll ask people to put a dollar figure to what the benefit costs, and then it's an equation of how much is your compensation compared to your benefit package.
Dartmouth issues a statement to each employee each year.
Yeah.
What their total compensation package
Packages.
is worth,
We do,
so that they know everything soup to nuts,
yeah, we do that too.
parking, et cetera.
But it's usually an equation of, your benefits equal so much percent of your annual salary.
Right,
It's
Yeah.
Which you
a
could-
good way to do it quickly, if you
you can
will.
get it right off the town report. Because it has total salary, it has total benefits.
So another question on STEP. Do we know if any other towns in the area are doing that? And if so, who?
Step systems, I can look, I can't name them off, but I believe most of them have some sort of.
We had a step system for many years.
I
Right.
I can tell you for a fact that Hanover and Lebanon PDs do steps. And it's a yearly step.
Yeah, and Hanover Town does a step system.
Yeah, I think Lebanon and Hanover both do step
Step
systems.
systems.
Most towns do some sort of step system.
General government, that's what.
So the steps, I feel like I've heard a couple different things. The steps are or are not merit-based.
We have a chance to set this up.
Okay.
To be determined.
So I think, to me, I'm gonna say they're a kind of a little bit of both. And I think we're gonna set it up probably in a way where it's almost expected that you're gonna be moving through the steps, but it needs to be tied to your evaluation somehow. So if you're not meeting expectations, then you're not going
yeah.
to move to that next step. And I've done it a few different ways in the past. In Weathersfield, I set one up where if you did not get a good eval, we froze your raise and you went into a needs improvement plan, but 3 months later, you have improved your performance, you're doing good, we'd give you that raise. We wouldn't wait till the next year to do it, but. So,
Did you give the raise retroactively?
no.
Yeah, you should have.
Oh, they weren't doing one. I like that.
Given that the budget is approved in March, when do Enfield employees get
regular basis, you only catch up to the
a change in pay?
April.
April 1.
Right.
We did it once before where it's retroactive, but if you've ever worked with New Hampshire retirement system, it is.
You don't do that.
It's about a month's worth of paperwork to figure it out.
Right.
Yeah.
I knew that.
So it's better to just go a month or so ahead and make it the
Right.
same month every year. Even if we waited till June, as long as it's the same
Right.
month every year, you're still moving forward.
So in anticipation of a successful budget, vote, if you will, you would be evaluating the employees in the first 2 months of
We
the year.
evaluate before town meeting. So we're ready to go when town meeting vote happens. When Elisa's budgeting, her spreadsheets are already set up to minus those first 3 months and keep them at the regular rate. And then they add in whatever proposed raise we have.
Yeah.
So we'll probably stay at April 1st because everything's already built that way.
Yes.
This makes sense. Not-
Well, I think this is a very good report. I will make one small comment. For what you paid, the budget committee deserves a copy.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you guys
And
want
it should not be at town expense, to be perfectly honest. The budget committee and the select board each deserve a copy for what you paid.
If you want a paper copy, let us know, because some people don't.
I
Yeah,
don't.
I specifically asked for no paper copy, so I would rather not have someone speak. Right.
But he's saying from them.
From
not
them,
From you,
not from you, from them.
They should-
I have to
Because-
look at what the contract
Yeah,
says.
if it's
'cause
outside of our contract.
Yeah, but outside the contract.
They
you can
actually
do.
cut
Yeah,
their
right.
prices a lot to work for the town of Enfield because I've worked with them before. They were not
Alright.
gonna do it. We were too small for them to work with.
It's
But,
wicked quick, and that,
yeah, no, we would print the copy if you want a copy.
I'll think
I
one.
actually have one spare printed copy with me right
Yeah,
now.
I was
you-
hoping that would be with you tonight.
Oh, there you go.
If anybody else wants one, let us know.
no, I'm okay.
I'm good.
I'm good.
PDF file.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I reviewed it
I
online.
can't
I
be
printed
killed
out,
a tree.
I printed out the pages that I wanted. I
Yeah.
just thought
And it's
that,
good to look at, but I will present you something, I don't wanna say completely different, but I will present you something based on that. I mean, most of that report, if you read it, is these are the positions that we looked at, we filled everybody else in. They kind of really, like you said, they're really transparent on what the process is. And there's a handful of pages in there that says this is where people go.
no, I read.
There's,
So you guys know, we got. some
there's 7 or 8 pages
on
that
our
are
side.
keep it.
Right. We got a spreadsheet with everybody's name and position and rank and where they move. I mean, we got the full spreadsheets that will make it easy for us to handle.
To use as a management tool.
And how was, like
Respect
employee
that.
response to filling out the questionnaire and stuff?
I
Pretty
think
good?
they were good.
Yeah.
Was yours was probably 100%, right? Or close?
Yeah. Yep, no, and actually I worked with a bunch of DPW.
I think it
people
was close
on
to
it, stuff like that.
100%. I don't wanna say it was, but we were in the 90 percentile probably with response.
I found it interesting that you got 30 responses back out of 50 and it's considered high.
That's really high.
I know, I was looking at it and I was like.
A lot of times they get
Wow.
like
Yeah, that's very-
10,
yeah.
and if you saw
That's very good.
if you see the form that they sent out, the spreadsheet to fill out, it is
Yeah.
daunting.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. The one thing that they do get out of this is they backfeed those communities' data,
Right.
so
They also get the report.
they can have the report, but the
Seems
report's
like a
not
good-
based on them. But they get the compensation data of what other people are
Right.
paying.
Exactly. It's a learning curve for them as well. That's right.
And then I think all the other towns, they understand this. They do them every now and then. You know, when we get them, we try to fill them out and turn them back.
Do you think it would be the below market that would tend not to send the information back, the towns that they feel they're, so they didn't want to share it?
Maybe, but not necessarily. I think it's more the towns that are struggling to keep up with day-to-day work.
That's it.
Yeah.
Just don't have the
Because
time.
if you, that's why I've said, looking at this,
Mhm.
it's the small towns that don't have the people to do it, to fill out the 30-page report, don't have the extra time.
It's quite a few hours.
So there's one person who's doing everything.
Yes.
Camera's not the only outlier.
Oh, no.
So they're the only one without, outside of the 3 deviations of what our median income was.
And we asked to add them, right?
We asked to add Hannah.
Yes.
And I think it was a good,
The other ones are all comparators, but
That
these-
makes-
Because of the labor.
Because of our.
You have to.
No,
I hate to be a party pooper, but I need to take my small friend home.
Mhm.
Thank you, guys.
is there anything else you guys would like to see us working on when we do this, or any other comments on how to?
I'm in favor of
I'm
the
glad we have that.
percentage for the first maybe 5 steps being a little higher than as you go up. In fact, I'm in favor of it decreasing a little bit as you go up because, you know, 1% of 50,000 is, you know, a lot more than 2 to 5% of, you know, 30,000.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
so
talked about
somehow,
that.
and that's a judgment
That'll be a
call.
little more work, but we can do that.
Yeah.
I've done it before.
That's not a bad way to go.
No,
That's-
because
yeah.
it's how many dollars and if you want to keep your, you know, other lower paid employees, which those are often the ones that come and go everywhere.
Yeah.
I think a higher percentage, maybe the 5 or whatever.
Well, let's look at that. When I
Yeah.
built the one in Weathersfield, like I said, it ramped up quickly the first 5 years.
Yeah.
And then I think it went to 1% for quite a while. And then when it got out farther on the scale, it was a 0.5%.
Yeah.
More as the longevity. Thank
Yeah.
you for your
Yeah.
longevity with the timelines.
And I think mine makes some
Especially
sense.
at the level.
Well, and most people ask like, how many dollars am I gonna get? So they're looking at, am I getting $1,000 raise or a $200 raise? I don't care what percentage it is necessarily.
It always seems too low when you get it on your check.
I know. Well, you gotta pay your tax.
Gotta pay your tax.
Benefit.
Spread out.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And that's why I think you're exactly right, is the percentage of a smaller income is so much less.
Less money.
It's just like, last year it was 8% for social security, but what does that amount to? Not even a cost of living for an average income.
But, better than nothing, but,
No.
I thought it was interesting data and I'm very pleased to see that you're so far out of whack.
Yeah, no,
I
I
mean,
was, I was
I was-
really pretty happy with that. I mean, if you would have said we're gonna be 2% behind when this is done, I think everybody would have, we probably would have said, well, let's not do it.
Let's not do it.
Yeah.
But now we know.
But it's good to know.
And to do get 30 communities to compare to, and we know that's higher, then we know that's pretty accurate, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, when you get that many communities,
Yeah.
you're right there. If you would have got 10,
Yeah,
but
that could be.
it sways the
which
numbers a lot
10,
more.
You know, yeah. Good thing we did that 8% raise last year. And the town voted for it, yay. Good.
Lots of that.
Yes, we did.
Anything else? We're gonna talk about something else.
That would have.
We were gonna do CIP, but the meeting wasn't warned properly last week, so we canceled it. So we are gonna be meeting after, and we will squeeze that into one of the future meetings and talk about that, but
I think I told them we're doing it on the 9th of the month.
that's
That's what the
the
CIP
plan.
is expecting.
Yeah. So this is the only thing on the agenda then.
So this was the only thing on the agenda tonight.
So there's no other, well, you hear some.
We have to open the meeting. Did you just- say no?
I didn't know. No.
Okay.
I just looked at it, I was like,
I'm sure you
I
didn't.
didn't realize it's
Do that at the next meeting.
either until step system.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
I.
Aye.
You do the
Make a
town.
motion, we take a motion.
But
Select board.
Tracy can't.
I can't second the
Tracy
budget,
can't
but I can second the select
We
board.
didn't do You're seconded, Nancy, congratulations.
Yeah.
Make a motion for the select board.
So now the select board is.
I'll second that.
Aye.
One way or another, I'll get my second in.
That's right.
Zippity doo dah.
Never worked in government, so never been exposed to the steps.
Probably should have said this, Darren, but just in case you guys haven't heard, we got word from Bread Loaf about a week and a half ago that they want us out of Whitney Hall by December 8th.
Wow.
So